Cooking with Amy.
Hey everybody, I have a really fun recipe for you today. I love meatloaf. I mean, you know, who doesn't love a really good meatloaf? But sometimes a nice big meatloaf can take an hour, hour and a half or longer to bake in the oven. So if you're craving meatloaf on a weeknight and you need it in a hurry, why not make mini meatloaves? This is one of the recipes in my latest cookbook. It's super fun, it's super easy, and then the extras freeze really well. You can freeze them in individual Ziploc bags so that if you're craving meatloaf, you don't have time to cook, just take them out of your freezer and pop them up in the microwave to heat. So this, basically we're going to start out with 2 pounds of ground beef, and then I'm adding, this is something that my grandmother always used in her meatloaf, 1 envelope of dry onion soup mix. It's a great way to add a lot of flavor to your meatloaf without having to chop up onion and garlic and all that kind of good stuff. Now we're going to use 1 egg, half of a cup of ketchup, and the other thing I like about this recipe is that you probably have most of the ingredients already on hand right in your pantry. You've got ketchup, you've got eggs in your fridge, you've maybe got some ground beef in your freezer, and these are just dried Italian breadcrumbs, about a half of a cup. Okay. So now, instead of making one big meatloaf, which you could with the same recipe, you could do this, in a bread pan or freeform it and bake it in a 9x13 in a freeform loaf. But as I mentioned, meatloaf can take an hour or longer to cook in the oven, hour and a half. So if you want a meatloaf in half or less the time, do individual meatloaves and do them in muffin tins. The key is you need to spray the muffin tins really well with cooking spray. Now with all meatloafs, I like to really, the only way to do it, I think, is to get in there with your hands and get busy. Mini everything are just very, very in these days, where everyone gets their own. So that's another fun thing about this recipe. I think the kids will really enjoy it because they get their own little meatloaf. And it's just something fun, something a little bit different. So I just want to make sure this gets all incorporated. With meatloaf, one of the keys is you don't want to over-mix it. So that way, if you do, it'll get kind of tough on you. So you don't want to over-mix it. Just mix it until all the ingredients, the egg and the ketchup and all that seasoning is combined. Okay, now I'm going to go back and wash my hands. I've got the raw meat, so I want to wash those really well. I'm a big fan, and in my latest cookbook I talk a lot about, cooking once and getting a few different meals out of it. So this is a great thing to make, and I think leftovers are a good thing in my book. You can actually use this recipe to make meatloaf sandwiches later in the week, or as I said, freeze the extras. I use a muffin scoop or an ice cream scoop and get nice portions of the meatloaf into my pan here. Kind of looks like little cupcakes. And then a little bit of ketchup on the top, just because I always put ketchup on the top of my meatloaves when I'm making them. And as I said, these bake up in about half the time. So in about 25 to 30 minutes in a 350-degree oven, they are done. And they pop right out so easily. Got the ketchup on top with that little bit of glaze. Serve these with some mashed potatoes and some vegetables, and you have really a fun, quick and easy meatloaf dinner during the week. And you may have a few extra of these. As I mentioned, just throw them in a Ziploc bag, put them in your freezer, and then when it comes to reheating them, pop them in the microwave for 30 seconds to a minute or so till they're just warm through, and you've got meatloaf on one of those crazy busy nights when you thought you were going to have to hit a drive-through restaurant. So this is a fun one, my mini meatloaf recipe. Recipe's on the website. You can also pick it up at any area Festival Foods.